שלא ייגמר לעולם. החול והים, רשרוש של המים, ברק השמיים, תפילת האדם, החול והים, רשרוש של המים, ברק השמיים, תפילת האדם. O God, my God, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rushing of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart.
Thank you, Cantor Richard Newman, for that beautiful and moving rendition of Eli, Eli, and for setting the mood for the evening. We are Leo Kleiner, and I'm Amy Shapiro, and we're both very honored to co-chair this year's Yom HaShoah commemoration. For the past 2 years, we commemorated Yom HaShoah on a virtual platform, and we so missed being together in the Daniel M. Soroff Community Hall. Tonight, we are thrilled to be together, both in person and virtually, and we want to offer our welcome to those of you who are here, as well as those at home, and hope that no matter how you are participating, the familiar music, prayers, and candlelighting will help facilitate an evening of community, memory, and remembrance. Our Milwaukee Jewish community is stronger and more united when we gather for a common purpose. Today we stop to remember those who perished in the Shoah. And we also recognize those who resisted and fought in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. As we come together, we affirm the next generation and the legacy that those who survived have passed down to each and every one of us.
Making this commemoration possible has been a collaborative partnership with the Milwaukee Jewish Federation, the Harry and Rose Sampson Family Jewish Community Center, and the Nathan and Esther Peltz Holocaust Education Resource Center. Tonight, joined by our insightful Yom HaShoah committee, we are proud to be together again this year. We also know that affirming life and remembering those who died is especially important this year. We are blessed to have a survivor community in Milwaukee who help us remember. Yet, as time marches on and the number becomes smaller, we grieve together for those who passed away this year. Never forget. In their memories, in memory of the 6 million, we stop and mourn. I would now like to welcome Rabbi Hannah Wallach of the Milwaukee Jewish Federation to offer our opening prayer.
A prayer for Yom HaShoah by Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs. Today on Yom HaShoah, we remember the victims of the greatest crime of humanity against humanity, the young, the old, the innocent, the 1.5 million children starved, shot, given lethal injections, gassed, burned, and turned to ash because they were deemed guilty of the crime of being different. We remember what happens when hate takes hold of the human heart and turns it to stone. What happens when victims cry for help and there is no one listening. What happens when humanity fails to recognize that those who are not in our image are nonetheless in God's image. We remember and pay tribute to the survivors who bore witness to what happened and to the victims, so that robbed of their lives, they would not be robbed also of their deaths. We remember and give thanks for the righteous of the nations who saved lives, often at risk of their own, teaching us how in the darkest night we can light a candle of hope. Today on Yom HaShoah, we call on you, God, to help us hear your voice that says in every generation, do not murder. Do not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. Do not oppress the stranger. We know that while we do not have the ability to change the past, we can change the future. We know that while we cannot bring the dead back to life, we can ensure their memories live on and that their deaths were not in vain. And so on this Yom HaShoah, we commit ourselves to one simple act, Yizkor, remember. May the souls of the victims be bound in the bond of everlasting life, and let us say, Amen.
Good evening. My name is Mark Shapiro. I'm absolutely blessed tonight to be the president and CEO of the Harry and Rose Sampson Family JCC. On behalf of Nancy Barnett, our chair of the board, our staff, I've never been more proud than to say, welcome home. Welcome back to the JCC. Welcome back to community. It's weird to say that I'm blessed on a night like tonight when remembering some of the worst atrocities in history are what we're here to do. But I feel blessed to be able to do it, to look out and be the person who hears the stories firsthand and remembers them, that brings community together to do just that, to remember, and especially in the face of growing hatred now, remembering and then taking action is what we must do. Tonight, we pause to remember the people who are lost from our community, together as community.
Thank you. My name is Miriam Rosenzweig, and I'm the president and CEO of the Milwaukee Jewish Federation. And on behalf of Joan Lubar, the chair of the board, our officers, our board members, and the staff, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. I didn't know Mark's opening, but it's fitting that he started with community. I'm not from Milwaukee, and I have such gratitude to HERC because through them I learned more about my grandfather's journey. And I want to share a little about that tonight. My grandfather was one of the first prisoners of Auschwitz. He arrived in 1942. His name was Yaakov Rosenzweig. And the reason I know the date is because I've seen the picture that HERC found. Shai Pilnitz actually was able to find his picture that they had when he was entered. When the war was over, my grandfather was left with not a single member of his family. His mother, father, brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews, cousins, there was not a single member of his family alive, and that included his wife and his 3 children. And he had to rebuild. And so when I talk about community tonight, I think about the fact that my grandfather's friend from Auschwitz remained his friend until the day they died. that my grandfather moved back, not back, my grandfather moved and built a family, supported his synagogue, his community, his children, his grandchildren, and he had an obligation for us, and that is we have to continue for those that we lost. We have to build community. Today, 4 of his grandchildren live in Israel. I get to share his memory tonight with this community. And so when I say that I get to be blessed to share Mark's words, to work at the Milwaukee Jewish Federation, where our mission is to take care of the needs of the Jewish people and build a vibrant Jewish future in Milwaukee and Israel and around the world, for that I thank you to be a part of it. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gita Weinstock-Chait, and I'm honored to serve as a committee member for Yom HaShoah. One of the most powerful aspects of Yom HaShoah each year is allowing our survivor community to kindle memorial light in memory of their family members and of the collective 6 million that we lost in the Shoah. On their behalf, I kindle the first 5 of lights as we hear from our 5 survivors from our community.
I'm Avram Beder, Holocaust survivor. I was born in Kovna, Lithuania. We were 6 children. I had 2 older brothers, Laser and Pesach, and 2 older sisters, Golda and Luba, and a younger sister, Riva. I was lucky to survive the war, and very lucky to come to this country, and especially when I ended up, it sent me to Milwaukee. I met my beautiful wife, Ruthie, and we have 4 wonderful children, and 7 grandchildren, and 7 great-grandchildren. And I thank God for a happy, good life. And I'm Yisrael Chai, okay.
What is your name?
I'm Dr. Peter Jacobson.
Where are you from?
Currently live with my wife in Mequon, Wisconsin. However, I was born in Bremen, Germany, late 1938, just prior to Kristallnacht.
Who are you remembering?
I'm remembering my mother's uncle, Louis Heinemann, who was an American citizen. He had done all the preparatory work to have my family leave Bremen, Germany. The family that immigrated to the United States included my parents, myself, an uncle, and grandmother. He also was our sponsor for the time that we lived in New York City, which was our first destination before coming to Wisconsin. I'm also remembering my parents who had the courage to leave everything behind and move to this country to escape the Nazis.
You have children and grandchildren.
Yes, my wife Jean and I have 2 sons and 4 grandchildren. One of the sons lives in San Francisco with his family, and the other lives in Illinois with his family.
My name is Werner Rickheimer. I'm a Holocaust survivor. I was born in Karlsruhe, Germany in 1937. Today I am remembering my parents, my grandparents, and all the other people who did not survive in the Holocaust. I'm blessed with 12 grandchildren, 9 of which are in Milwaukee, and 3 of which are in Buffalo, New York.
My name is Nathan Tafel. I was born in Wielki, Poland, to a family of 10 children, 7 sisters, and 2 brothers, and father and mother. And through the course of time, they were all believed killed in a concentration camp. I was the only survivor. I have 2 sons and a daughter.
And 2 grandsons.
And 2 grandsons.
Thank you.
Hello, I am Eva Zeret, maiden name Eva Klein. I was born 1936 in Budapest, Hungary. My father had a beautiful family, a brother, a sister, and their families. And my rest of my father's family all were murdered except 1 cousin is alive. My mother came from 12 children, and most of them, 3/4 of them were murdered. What I saw during the Holocaust was horrible, what human being can do, and hatred boomerangs and creates more hatred. I survived with my mother, my grandmother, and 1 aunt, my mother's sister. And I came 1957 January to this country. I had another child, Lisa, and Lisa has a husband, John, and 2 wonderful children, a girl and a boy. And my daughter Judy also has 2 children, a girl and a boy, and they're already married and have their own children. I have 4 great-grandchildren whom I'm very proud of also and very happy about, because what I saw during the Holocaust, all the killing and hatred, I want to live in this wonderful country where what I adopted, and in peace and kindness and goodness that I try to install into my grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And thank you for having me.
My name is Jeanette Peckerman. I'm representing the 2nd generation children of Holocaust survivors, and I'm lighting the 6th candle today in memory of my parents, Rose Krastowski and Arthur Krastowski, and all of their family that perished in the Shoah.
Ani Ma'amin, Ani Ma'amin, Ani Ma'amin, Ani Ma'amin, Be'emunah Shelema, Shelema, Beviat HaMashiach, Beviat HaMashiach, Ani Ma'amin, Beviat HaMashiach, Beviat HaMashiach, Ani Ma'amin. Ani Ma'amin, Ani Ma'amin, Ani Ma'amin. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה, באמונה שלמה, ואף על פי שיתממע, עם כל זה אני מאמין, ואף על פי שיתממע, עם כל זה אני מאמין. אני מאמין, אני מאמין, אני מאמין. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה, באמונה שלמה, עם כל זה אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא. עם כל זה אחכה לו בכל יום שיבוא. אני מאמין, אני מאמין, אני מאמין, אני מאמין.
Good evening. My name is Samantha Abramson, and I am the Executive Director of the Nathan and Esther Peltz Holocaust Education Resource Center. I want to thank each of you for being here today, especially to our survivors, who I'm really grateful to count among my friends and who I look to for inspiration every day because of their bravery and resilience. I am also grateful to the leadership of our committee, including our committee chairs, Leo Kleiner and Dr. Amy Shapiro. This entire process has taken months, and I am so proud of the committee and so grateful for your leadership. And I'm also grateful to the staff and all the participants joining us today. When I first met today's speaker, Pinchas Guder, back in 2018 at the Illinois Holocaust Museum in Skokie, I was immediately captivated by his stories of love, of pain, and of resistance. To listen to Pinchas speak is to be transported back in time, using all of your senses through descriptive and often poetic, and sometimes sung, words by Pinchas. Throughout our conversation, I learned about Pinchas's childhood, the stories of his Hasidic family, who were winemakers in Poland for generations, long before the Holocaust. I heard the heartbreaking accounts of how, one by one, Pinchas lost nearly every member of his family during the Holocaust, and how he himself survived 6 concentration camps. Despite the significant impact our conversation left on me, Pinchas had no memory of it. Though, as you'll see in just a few minutes, his memory and his ability to connect personally with each human being he interacts with is second to none. The truth of the matter is that the man I spoke with wasn't really Pinchas at all, but rather a hologram developed by the USC HaShoah Foundation to allow audiences to have intimate conversations with Holocaust survivors to continue learning the lessons of this dark history long after they passed on. The process for creating these holograms was recently documented on 60 Minutes. Some of you might have watched it, and included the real Pinchas answering over 2,000 questions in front of thousands of bright lights for a whole week straight from 9 to 5 daily. He actually had 3 different sets of the same outfit. At HERC and within our Milwaukee Jewish community, we recognize the importance of documenting, remembering, and sharing the lessons of the Holocaust to remember those who perished, to honor their memories, and to inspire humanity to love one another. It is why we are all here today, and why I am so honored we get to hear from Pinchas this evening. Pinchas is currently residing in Canada with his family, where he is also the honorary cantor of his synagogue. Due to the ongoing pandemic and in the interest of safety, we opted to pre-record our conversation with him. Please join me now in virtually welcoming Pinchas. One of my questions for you would be, what should we take away from the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising today? What lessons can we learn, from the Holocaust and also from the resistance that took place?
Well, this is a very good question, because let me just tell you what happened, and then I can elaborate on it for a couple of minutes. At 5 o'clock in the morning, my mother woke me up and my twin sister, and the telephones were working in the Warsaw Ghetto. Everything else wasn't working, but the telephones were working. And we had the resistance fighters outside, and they phoned and they said that the Nazis are coming to liquidate now the ghetto completely, including the Jews that are there officially working for the factories, and also the wild Jews, the ones that were, about half of them were wild like we were. And we went down to the bunker. We had a bunker on corner Mila and Nalewki number 49, under the ruins of a building which was destroyed in the bombing of Warsaw in 1939. And my father, who was a winemaker, and I'm sure you read my story, you know that he had some bottles of wine, so he took them down to the cellar, to the bunker, and the baker who used to bake bread for the official factories that were still working must have baked some matzah, and we went down there, and regardless of anything, the empathy, the spirituality of the Jews that were in the Warsaw Ghetto, facing the most terrible circumstances of facing death by shooting or gassing, they still celebrated that evening, the eve of Passover. I mean, these were all Jews that knew the Haggadah off by heart. Most of them were very religious, and they cried and asked for deliverance, just like God delivered us from Egypt. But they didn't stop. They continued, and they went and they went on. And I think the most important thing the lesson that you can learn from that is that the Jewish nation, the Jewish culture, the Jewish religion, the Jewish empathy, the Jewish spirituality is there. It's part of you, and the Jewish nation will never disappear. God will look after us. There will always be a remnant of us that will continue. And I think the world must remember that under the most terrible circumstances, we celebrated in a bunker in the Warsaw Ghetto while they were shooting upstairs on top, in the streets, and the ghetto was burning. We were celebrating the Passover. We didn't give up. We never. Resistance is not always resistance with a gun in your hand. Resistance is a spiritual, emotional, and a vigorous resistance of humanity, of empathy towards other human beings and towards your own culture.
Thank you. That was really powerful. So going back to what happened in the Warsaw Ghetto, so you celebrated Passover while the shooting was going on overhead, and then what happened next?
Well, we were in the bunker for about 3.5 weeks till about the middle of May. And from the 19th of April to about the middle of May, I don't remember if it was the beginning of the week of May or the middle of the week of May. And then we were discovered. There were lots of informers who were promised life, and they went around. In the evening, we used to open the traps to try and get some fresh air. So we would walk out and breathe some fresh air, because we used to get from air vents in the ruins, we used to get air, but it was, there were 150 people in that bunker. So, and there was electricity, there was water, but, the air was not very good. So we used to go out. So we don't know who, how and what, or there may have been the Polish police, the Ukrainians. I mean, it doesn't really, you don't really know. But we were discovered. And then through the air vents, a voice came, and I don't remember, it was Polish or Yiddish or German, and they said, if you don't come out in half an hour, we're going to throw gas bombs and we're going to put the building on fire. So we went out, and I remember one thing that I've never forgotten. I've got it in front of, I've got a photographic memory, and I still can see these. When you come out, you had these SS paratroopers and wearing smocks with their machine guns across their chest. And they told us, Hände hoch, nicht schießen, nicht schießen. Don't shoot, put your hand in the air. And this little boy, who was 11 years old, was very proud. Why? I thought to myself, they're scared of us. They're scared of us. I mean, these Balachamovat, they're scared of us. And then they burned the buildings down anyway. Once, they thought maybe there's some people still hiding. So as they were leaving and everybody came out, they still burned the buildings, they went around, and then we were walking in the middle of the road after a while, when they got quite a big group of people together, and we were walking in the middle of the road, and both buildings, all the buildings were burning. So we were walking in the middle of fire. And after the war, it didn't strike me then, but after the war, suddenly it struck me that we were walking in the middle of fire to our death. And Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Jews walked amongst water, on the two walls of water, towards their salvation. And it just didn't, you can't imagine. And people who didn't want to, we knew that we were going to die because we knew all about Treblinka, we knew everything that was going on there. So they used to run into the fire, and the guards used to shoot after them, and laughing, they thought to myself, either they're going to die, what's the point of wasting bullets? And they just didn't, they used to pick up the rifle and then just leave it and smile and laugh their head off because people were running into the fire to try and run away from the group. And then we came to the Umschlagplatz, and they chased us into, it used to be a Jewish school and a Jewish hospital. They put us into a room, and in that room, they pushed as many people as possible. You couldn't actually lie down. You could only squat or stand. And for more than 24 hours, maybe longer, because it was the day and the night and the next day that we were there. They wouldn't allow you out. Women with children, elderly men, everybody. And so everything was done in it. People were screaming, crying. Children were. You can't imagine what kind of apocalyptic hell was inside there. And my father had a sock of sugar with a teaspoon. And then the Ukrainian guards, I remember most of them were Ukrainian guards. And if you gave them some jewelry, they gave you water, a bottle of water. So my father, I saw him take off my mother's ring from her finger, and he went to the door where the Ukrainians were standing. He gave him the gold ring, and he gave him a bottle of water. And my father gave my sister and I a teaspoon of sugar from time to time and a little bit of water. They never touched it. Even in the wagon afterwards, when we were chased into the wagon, he still held on to that water and didn't touch it. And my mother didn't touch it, but the children were given a little bit of sugar and a bit of water. And then the train started going, and we saw that we were going to Treblinka, like all the Jews from Warsaw Ghetto. But in our case, we finished up in Lublin. And afterwards, of course, I found out it was Majdanek. And then we got off the station and we walked towards Majdanek. And we came to a big open space with sand, and they divided men from women, women from children, women with children. It was, you cannot imagine the dogs, the shouting, the screaming, the shooting. It's just, you can't, I who was there, who got the pictures in front of my eyes, I cannot imagine that such a thing can happen. And when I look at the things today, when I saw what's happening in Ukraine today, this is the type of schemes that you see where inhuman people, go around and kill children and women for no reason, for no rhyme. It may be not exactly the same, but the fact is that today, it's just never ending. It's got to end somewhere. And then my father saved my life, because my father said, he must have known more than I did. I was 11 years old. He said, I'm going to take you with the men. And I was a head taller than my sister, my twin sister, although we were born together. And he took me and he said, you must say you're 5 years older. All my documents that I have now, because once they took you as a slave laborer, everything was written out. So I was born in 1927 instead of 1932. So I didn't know why my father was saying that to me, but I did. So then when everybody was taken away, I mean, there's a terrible scene which I find difficult to talk about. And that is when my sister was separated from my mother. And she saw my mother, and I was watching my mother. And she ran towards my mother, and she hugged her. And all the time that she ran towards my mother and hugged her, I was watching her long, she had a braid, a beautiful blonde braid. We were all blue-eyed and blonde. And after that, my brain did something which I cannot to this day understand. Me with the photographic memory, I cannot remember anything about my sister. For example, when we went to collect the children from the baker, I am walking with her. She's holding one side and I'm holding the other. I know she's walking next to me, but I can't see her. Can you imagine that I can't even have a photo in my mind? I remember all my cousins, my uncles, my grandparents, my great uncles. I mean, the whole family. I remember them, and I've got pictures at least. But I can't remember my sister. And then they shoved us, when everybody was taken away, they shoved us into a barrack, tell us to undress naked. And we ran with our hands in the air, naked. My father ran in front of me. And there was a little man, not a very tall man, with a white coat, with a stick, pushing people right, left, right, left. And I came into a room, and there were shower heads. And we knew in the ghetto that they put shower heads so that we fool you, but gas comes out. I started saying my prayers because I was waiting to die. But water came out in my case. And then I was shoved into another barrack, and I was given prison clothes, wooden clogs, and a kind of hat, and then went out on a roll call, and I was looking for my father. And I couldn't find my father. And I thought to myself, if I'm alive, then my father must be alive. And my mother must be alive, and my sister must be alive. Where are they? What's happening? I saw a man who I recognized. My father used to bring people in at night to little kitchen where we were, people that were in the street. So I asked him, I said, did you see my father? Where's my father? Where's my father? And he didn't answer. He was pushing me and didn't answer. Eventually, he lifted his eyes to heaven. And I didn't know exactly what that meant, but I knew that, when a Jew lifts his eyes to heaven, things are not good. He prays or something. And the next day, I found out that my father, my mother, and my sister were murdered the day they arrived in Majdanek. The most important aspect of education is to tell people what happened. My torch is not like the Olympic torch. The Olympic torch is a torch of goodwill amongst, sportsmen. They should compete well, and they shouldn't fight, and they should have not cheat or things like that. But my flame that I give them is a flame that's got many, many flames. My torch has got many flames. To give you an example, no religious discrimination, no racial discrimination, no homophobia, no xenophobia, and above all, no hate. Hate is vicious, it's pernicious, it brings about people to be vengeful. So try and do it. And I give it to them and I say, keep that flame and hand that flame to everybody and light up the world. We all have in us, like the old Dead Sea Scrolls, they're the son of light and the sons of darkness. And I say, be the sons of light. Light up the world with the flame that I give you and make the world a better place. Zat me gezind in Yiddish, as they say. You know, I speak Yiddish. Yiddish is very close to me. It's my parental language. My mother spoke Polish to me. My father spoke only Yiddish. You know, I studied in a yeshiva after the war. I studied in the Warsaw Ghetto. My father made sure that I studied the Talmud, even at that young age, underground in a cellar with a teacher, with a malamed, who had 8, 9 children, boys, and we studied Nedorim et Neran. Ask your husband what does Nedorim et Neran is. Now Nedorim is a very difficult masechta, you know, and the Ran is a very difficult, kind of explanations. But we did, and regardless of anything that was going on there, we continued, and we continued, and this is how. And that is what is important about Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael Chai. L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim. L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim. L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim. B'Yerushalayim habanu yai. You know, I'm a cantor for the last 35 years to my synagogue. You must know about that. So don't ask me how I became a cantor. I've got a decent, reasonable voice. I don't call myself a cantor. They call me cantor. But I am about tefillah, and I learned it from, at my father's side. Yom Kippur, we were behind false walls in 1942 and praying to God on Yom Kippur, and so we never gave it up. We never gave it up. So as I said before,
it's an incredible story of resilience.
Anyway,
it is.
Be well.
Be well.
Stay
Thank
safe,
you.
and I will say goodbye.
What a shining light in Am Yisrael Chai indeed. Good evening, I'm Jody Habish-Sinnigan, grateful to be here with all of you again in this shared space after too long apart. For nearly 30 years, the Holocaust Art and Essay Contest has played a meaningful part in our community's Yom HaShoah commemoration. We together have shared the experience of witnessing the way in which young people can internalize and personalize the lessons of the Holocaust once they are given the opportunity to do so. Their heartfelt reflections offer proof and hope that next generations will help us preserve the memory of all the Jewish people, families, and communities lost in the Shoah. As I stand here, I truly miss the young people at my side, eager to share their written and artistic works with all of you. I miss their voices and their perspectives. But fear not, I am pleased to inform you that the contest is continuing this year in a revamped and expanded format. While still open to all middle and high school students across Wisconsin and funded by the Habish Family Foundation, new this year, students are free to submit an essay, artwork, video, podcast, website, or other medium that speaks to them. Thank you to all of the committee members who put so much time and effort into reconceptualizing the contest, with special thanks to Rachel Baum, Rabbi Shema, and Samantha Abramson. This year's prompt asks students to consider the role of bystanders in the Holocaust. That is, the everyday people who chose not to act in the face of Jewish persecution. And ask students to share how a story or a lesson that they learned from the Holocaust has motivated them to be an upstander. Once the final entries are received, which are due May 1st, the winners will be announced and their creative work shared, so please stay tuned in the weeks to come. Another Yom HaShoah tradition that we continue with today is inviting a member of our Interfaith community to offer a few words with us. In just a moment, we will hear from Reverend David Simmons, rector at St. Matthias Episcopal Church and chair of the Interfaith Conference of Greater Milwaukee, an outstanding organization that my beloved father-in-law, Mel Sinekin, of blessed memory, praised at every opportunity. When we partner with our brothers and sisters of different faiths, we are stronger. When we learn, dialogue, educate, and reach out to one another, we break down the barriers that separate us. Thank you, Reverend Simmons, for joining us today, and thank you all.
It's a solemn honor to be here among you today as we remember the millions of lives lost in the Shoah. I'm the chair of the Interfaith Conference of Greater Milwaukee, a group that represents over 20 different religious judicatories in the Greater Milwaukee area, including the Milwaukee Jewish Federation. We know, and we've heard again, the history, the profound effects the horrors of the Holocaust wrought on the Jewish community of Europe, as well as other minorities, and the changes in the world that have happened in its aftermath. One of the most important questions to be asked in the wake of any communal trauma is how it will motivate its victims, its members, and its descendants. History continues, and yesterday's horror will transform into tomorrow's blessing or bane. The phrase "never again" in relationship to the Holocaust was first used by survivors of Buchenwald in 1945, and that phrase has been used in many different contexts throughout the years, but I wish to highlight the way the Jewish community has brought it to bear here in our context in the Greater Milwaukee area. Never again has been the underlying subtext for much of the Jewish community's work in advocacy in our community, from participation in the Interfaith Conference to tireless work in civil rights and refugee resettlement. The Milwaukee Jewish community has taken that excruciating pain from the 20th century and turned it into a rallying cry that is the core of resistance to discrimination and oppression, no matter what quarter it comes from or whom the target is. You have stood with the Milwaukee Interfaith community in the wake of the Sikh temple shooting and the Kenosha shootings and aftermath. We have stood together during the grief and fear created by the Tree of Life attack in Philadelphia and the assault on the mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand. The cry, "never again," has become one adopted by our greater community, fueled by the memories of those first handwritten signs at Buchenwald. Never again will the Jewish community stand alone in Milwaukee. As long as we keep the memories alive, never again can we stand idly by when hate threatens to oppress or destroy God's beloved diverse children of any race, creed, or religion. As we take time today to remember those lives taken away by fascism and hate in the 20th century, may their memories truly be a blessing to us, and that they move all of us to greater acts of kindness, solidarity, and compassion for all those who continue to suffer under the yokes of violence and oppression.
Please rise for El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein B'Maromim, המצא מנוחה נכונה בצל כנפי השכינה. במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מאירים ומזהירים את נשמות אחינו ואחיותינו שנהרגו ונשחטו ושנשרפו החיים על קידוש השם בעבור שכולנו כל בני ישראל מתייחדים עם זכרם הקדוש ומתפללים בעד עליית נשמותיהם וקדדם תהי מנוחתם. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. ארץ אל תכסי דמם וינוחו בשלום על משכבם. ונאמר אמן.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחיי חון וביומי חון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בגלה ובזמן קריב יאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם עומי עומיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו, לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמא ויאמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן.
Hello, my name is Uriah Roth and I'm the community Shaliach emissary for the Milwaukee Jewish Federation. I'm also a third generation of 4 Holocaust survivors, and You know, today, actually exactly 70 years ago, it was the first Yom HaShoah ceremony in Israel. And while it was a consensus in Israel that a day like Yom HaShoah is needed, in Israel, nothing else was a consensus. What else do we bring to this day to make it important and meaningful? So we do have the siren in Israel on the morning of Yom HaShoah, exactly at 11 a.m. And we do have the big ceremony every the night of Yom HaShoah next to the Museum of Yad Vashem. But we're trying to find new ways to remember and to include everyone. In the last 10 years, there are a few new ways that people found to be part of it. There's a group of young adults who are gathering with a Holocaust survivor or a second generation of Holocaust survivor and trying to hear or listening to their stories. There are people who now are fasting on Yom HaShoah. It's a new movement now in Israel calling, trying to seek for holiness and trying to find meaning to this day. And there are people just taking the guitar and just singing Israeli songs for hours and hours, sometimes until like 6 a.m. in the morning. It's on us to find new ways to remember, to make sure that our children and our grandchildren will actually being part of remembering the Holocaust. Because in the next generation, there won't be the survivor, it will be on us to find those ways. And we have to start now in 2022. In every Jewish community in Israel and around the world, we need to start that discussion today. Thank you very much.
The strains of Hatikva, the hope, remind us that even as we mourn and remember, we have hope. And as a profound expression of that hope, we are deeply grateful to have students from the Milwaukee Jewish Day School lead us in Hatikva. It's always difficult at Yom HaShoah to find a way to speak about today's world. For we do not ever want to minimize or reduce this moment to anything other than remembering the persecution and murder of our people at the hands of the Nazis and their collaborators, and honor the resilience of those who resisted. Yet the memory of the Shoah makes it difficult to ignore the violence, suffering, and brutality of war that is taking place today in Ukraine and throughout the world.
Let our memory of the Shoah invite us to recognize and have compassion for the anguish of people today. Let us strive to attain the actuality of never again for our people and for the world in which we live. And may our hearts send peace to all who mourn and suffer to help heal the brokenness of our world. Together, we join in an adaptation of Shalom Rab, a prayer for peace found in our programs. Please join us. Grant us peace, your most precious gift, O eternal source of peace, and give us the will to proclaim this message to all the peoples of the earth. Bless our country as a safeguard of peace, its advocates among the nations. May contentment reign within our borders, health and happiness within our homes. Strengthen the bonds of friendship and fellowship among all the inhabitants of the land. Plant virtue in every soul, and may love of your name hallow every home and every heart. Praised are you, Eternal One, who blesses our people with peace. Baruch atah Adonai, hamavarech et amo Yisrael b'shalom. Thank you for joining us this evening for our Yom HaShoah commemoration. We look forward to being together again next Tuesday, May 3rd at 6 p.m. for the Yom HaZikaron commemoration, and on Sunday, May 15th at 2 p.m. right here at the JCC campus for Yom HaAtzmaut and the Walk for Israel. May the memories of the righteous always be for a blessing.